the day Aldous Brennan walked into the lobby of Hartwell Energy Solutions. He was wearing the same jacket he had worn to his wife's funeral 3 years earlier. Not because he had nothing else. Because he had not thought about it. He had thought about the folder in his hand, the documents inside it, and the name of the person he needed to deliver them to. That was all he had thought about since 5 in the morning, when he had gotten up quietly so as not to wake his daughter, made coffee he did not drink, and driven 40 minutes down the 401 in the gray early light of a Tuesday in November. He was not a man who made a habit of going to places like that. The lobby had a ceiling that went up 2 full floors, and the floor was a kind of pale stone that reflected the light in a way that made you feel you were standing on something that cost more than your house. He stood at the front desk and gave his name. The woman behind the desk looked at him the way people look at something that has appeared in the wrong place. Not rude, exactly. Just a particular kind of careful. He told her he had a submission for Hartwell's procurement review. He had a contract reference number, and he had a deadline, and today was the last day of that deadline. He had called 3 times over the past 2 weeks to confirm the submission process and had been told each time to arrive in person with hard copies and a signed verification sheet. He had done all of that. He had the phone records to prove the calls. He had a folder with tabs. She asked him to wait. He waited. The lobby had a seating area with low chairs that were more decorative than functional. He did not sit. He stood near the desk with the folder in both hands and watched the elevator bank across the room. People in good suits walked through and did not look at him. A man in a hard hat came through a side door and disappeared again. Somewhere behind a partition, a phone rang and was answered. 20 minutes passed. Then the elevator opened and 2 men came across the lobby, and Aldous understood immediately that only one of them mattered. The other one, younger, was there to be seen standing next to the first. The first was Reginald Hartwell, not the founder. The founder had been his father, but the current chairman of Hartwell Energy Solutions. A man whose name appeared on a brass plaque on the side of the building and on the dedication plaques of 2 hospital wings and a university library. He was in his early 60s and had the kind of easy physical comfort that comes from having never needed to make yourself small for anyone. He looked at Aldous the way a man looks at a thing he has already decided about. He said, without stopping, that procurement was handled by the 3rd floor team and that Aldous should have been directed there at the door. Aldous said he had been told to deliver directly to the executive review office, per the contract terms on file. Hartwell stopped then. He turned fully and looked at Aldous with the patient expression of someone who has decided to spend 30 seconds being amused before moving on. He asked who, exactly, had told him that. Aldous said he had spoken with someone named Deirdre in procurement support on the 14th, the 21st, and again last Thursday. He had the times of the calls and the name she had given. He said he was not there to cause a problem. He was there to file a submission under an existing review agreement before the deadline closed at noon. Hartwell smiled. It was not a warm smile. It was the smile of a man who has been in a great many rooms and has found that most problems, when handled with the right tone of voice, simply dissolve. He turned to the young man beside him and said something in a low voice. The young man nodded and walked to the desk. He picked up the desk phone and spoke into it briefly. Then he came back and said, in a pleasant and entirely unconvincing way, that the review agreement Aldous was referencing had been reassigned to a different procurement stream, and that the window for hard copy submissions under that stream had closed on the Friday prior. Aldous said that was not what the contract stated. Hartwell said, with the same patient smile, that contracts of that type were subject to administrative revision and that a notice had been sent. Hartwell said he had not received any notice. Hartwell said that was unfortunate, and then, before Aldous could say anything further, Hartwell said to the desk attendant, loudly and clearly, that security should be called, that this gentleman had been asked to leave twice and was refusing, and that they should not have to manage this kind of disruption in a professional environment. It was not true. He had not been asked to leave once. But the lobby was not empty. There were people near the elevator. There was a woman at the seating area with a laptop. There were two men coming through the main doors who slowed when they heard the tone of it. Reginald Hartwell had said what he said at a volume designed to be heard, and the shape of what he had said, that a man was refusing to leave, that he was a disruption, was now in the air of that lobby in a way that couldn't be taken back. Aldous felt something move through him that was not quite anger. He had felt real anger before. He knew what it did to his hands and his breathing. This was something quieter than that, something that sat lower in his chest and did not move. He put the folder on the desk. He placed it face up, flat, with the contract reference number visible on the tab. He placed beside it his driver's license, which had his name and his address on it, and a handwritten note on which he had already written the date, the time, and the words, "Delivered in person. Refused at reception. Witness, front desk staff," he said clearly, and without raising his voice, that he was not refusing to leave. He was leaving. But the documents would remain, and the fact of his having been present with them on this date and at this time was now part of the record, along with the names of the individuals who had spoken to him. He said he hoped they had a good morning, and he walked to the door. Behind him he heard Reginald Hartwell laugh. It was a short sound, half breath, half voice, the sound of a man wrapping up a small and satisfying moment. A few people nearby shifted. Someone near the elevator said something under their breath. Aldous pushed through the glass door and walked to his truck in the parking structure and sat in it for 4 minutes without starting the engine. He was not shaking. He was something else. He was thinking about his daughter, Mira, who was 7 years old, and who that morning had asked him whether he would be home in time to help her with a school project that was due on Thursday. He had said yes. He had meant it. He thought about that and not about the lobby, and then he started the truck and drove. What Reginald Hartwell did not know, what he could not have known, because he had not looked at the folder and had not looked at the man, was that Aldous Brennan was not a subcontractor making a speculative bid. He was the lead mechanical engineer on a retrofit project that had been under discussion with Hartwell Energy for 14 months. He had signed an NDA. He had attended 3 internal planning sessions by video. He had, at Hartwell's own request, submitted a preliminary diagnostic report on the existing infrastructure at their Barrie facility, a report that had been used. He would later be able to prove this in the construction of Hartwell's updated compliance application to the Provincial Energy Authority. The contract under which he had submitted that report included a formal review clause. That clause guaranteed him a documented response within 60 days of formal submission. The 60-day window had been extended, in writing, twice. He had the emails, he had the signatures, he had a copy of the internal Hartwell memo, forwarded to him by mistake by someone in their procurement office, a mistake that no one had ever followed up on, that referred to his diagnostic findings as core to the revised load balancing framework. He had not come to the lobby to make a scene. He had come because the 60-day window was closing, and because he had learned, through a professional contact who worked adjacent to the provincial energy file, that Hartwell was about to submit its updated compliance application, the one built on his work, without his name on it. He had tried the quiet way first. He had sent emails. He had called the procurement office. He had left messages with Hartwell's executive assistant. He had sent a formal letter through a paralegal. None of it had been answered, so he had done the only thing left to do. He had driven 40 minutes down the 401 in the gray light of a November morning with a folder full of documents and presented himself in person before the deadline. And Reginald Hartwell had called security. The thing about a mistake of that size is that it rarely announces itself. Hartwell had made decisions in that lobby with the confidence of a man who did not expect them to cost him anything. He had embarrassed a contractor in front of witnesses. He had misrepresented the situation to those witnesses. He had used a security call as a social tool, the way some men use a certain tone of voice, not because they need to, but because they can. And he had done all of it in view of a lobby camera that was, as it happened, functioning perfectly. Aldous had not known about the camera. He had not needed to know. He had done nothing he needed to hide. What he did do that afternoon was call a man named Edwin Quarry. Edwin Quarry was not a lawyer. He was a retired inspector with the Ontario Ministry of Energy and was now a consultant retained by several parties involved in provincial energy compliance work. He had been a contact of Aldous's for 6 years, since a job Aldous had done on a municipal heating system in Sudbury where Edwin had been the oversight inspector. They were not close friends. They exchanged messages 2 or 3 times a year, usually about something technical. But Edwin Quarry was a man who, in Aldous's experience, answered his phone and said exactly what he thought. Aldous told him what had happened. He did not exaggerate. He described the lobby, the conversation, the documents, the laughing. He described the preliminary diagnostic report and what he believed it had been used for. He said he had the emails. He said he had the memo. Edwin was quiet for a moment. Then he asked, "The compliance application Hartwell was filing, had it gone in yet?" Aldous said he didn't think so. His contact had said it was being prepared for submission. Edwin said he would make a call. Aldous said he was not asking Edwin to do anything he was uncomfortable with. Edwin said he wasn't uncomfortable. He said that if what Aldous was describing was accurate, and if Hartwell had incorporated findings from a contracted report into a regulatory filing without proper attribution or compensation, that was not simply a contract dispute. That was a problem for the ministry. He said that compliance applications were examined carefully, and that if the provenance of the technical data in them turned out to be contested, the application could be paused pending review. He said he would make a call. Aldous thanked him and went to pick up Mira from school. She was standing at the edge of the schoolyard, with her backpack on and her coat not zipped up despite the cold, which was a thing he had given up trying to change, because she ran warm and she knew it. She saw his truck and raised one hand in a wave that was somehow both casual and enthusiastic, the particular wave of a 7-year-old who is pleased to see you but does not want to seem too pleased. He pushed the door open from inside and she climbed up. She said her day had been fine. She said a boy in her class had tried to eat a crayon and it had not gone the way he had expected. She said her project was about weather systems and she needed a cardboard tube and some blue tissue paper. He said he thought they had a cardboard tube at home. She said she needed it to be a big one. He said they would check. She did not ask how his day had been, which was usual. She was 7. But somewhere around the 3rd set of lights she looked at him and said, in the careful way she had sometimes, that he seemed like he was thinking about something. He said he had had a hard morning. She considered this. Then she said that when she had hard mornings she usually felt better after lunch and asked if he had eaten lunch. He said he hadn't. She looked at him with an expression that was his wife's expression. Not in the surface of it, but in the quality of it, the particular combination of patience and mild disapproval. And said that was probably part of the problem. He said she was probably right. In the days that followed, Aldous heard nothing from Hartwell. This was not surprising. He had not expected to hear from them. What he had expected, and what happened, was that things began to move through channels he could not directly observe. Edwin Quarry, as it turned out, still had a collegial relationship with 2 people at the ministry who handled compliance applications in the energy sector. He did not have authority to pause anything himself, but he had the standing to raise a question, professionally and through the right avenues, about the sourcing of technical data in a pending application. That kind of question, asked by the right person through the right channel, did not disappear. It was not dramatic. There was no raid. There was no photograph of Reginald Hartwell being escorted out of a building. What happened was quieter and more durable than that. Hartwell's compliance application was flagged for supplementary review. the ministry sent a formal inquiry requesting documentation of the provenance of several technical findings in the load balancing framework. Hartwell's legal team responded with a document package. The ministry's review team examined that package and found that the core diagnostic data traced to a report that was, according to Hartwell's own internal records, produced under a formal contract with an independent engineer. That engineer's name was Aldous Brennan. The contract included a review clause and a compensation clause tied to the use of the findings in regulatory filings. Hartwell's application could not proceed while the contract dispute was unresolved. The pause cost them time. In the energy sector, time costs money in ways that compound. Hartwell had partners who were waiting on the compliance clearance to proceed with a facility expansion. Those partners had their own timelines. Delays of this kind were written into their agreements as liability triggers. Hartwell's legal team, when they understood what the pause meant financially, moved quickly. They contacted Aldous through a law firm. He had, by that point, retained his own counsel. A straightforward thing, as it turned out, because the paralegal he had contacted weeks earlier had already flagged the situation to a lawyer in her firm who handled contractor disputes and had been following it with interest. The documentation Aldous had was clean, the emails were time-stamped, the memo was damaging. The lobby camera footage, which his lawyer had requested formally as part of the record, showed clearly what had happened, what had been said, and what had been placed on the desk, and the manner in which Aldous had conducted himself throughout. The settlement negotiations took 11 days. Aldous was compensated for the diagnostic report under the original contract terms, plus usage fees for the regulatory filing, plus costs. He was not required to disclose the amount. He did not want to discuss the amount. What he wanted, and what he got, was a written acknowledgement from Hartwell that the work had been his and had been used with his knowledge and under the terms of a valid contract. That sentence, that single sentence, in a legal document, was what he had come to the lobby to secure. It had taken a longer road than he had expected, but it was in writing now and it had his name on it. Reginald Hartwell did not call him. He did not expect him to. What changed and what didn't change is always worth being honest about. Hartwell Energy Solutions did not collapse. The empire, as empires go, remained standing. The compliance application was eventually approved, the expansion proceeded, and Reginald Hartwell continued to have his name on the side of a building and on the dedication plaques of 2 hospital wings and a university library. None of that changed. What changed was smaller and more specific. Aldous paid off the last of the debt that had accumulated in the year after his wife died, when he had been too much inside his grief to be careful about money. He fixed the heating in the house, which had been uneven since October. He bought Mira a winter coat she had wanted, a particular blue one with a hood that had a small bear face on it, which she wore every day for 2 months until she decided it was babyish, at which point she stopped wearing it, but did not get rid of it. He did not tell her the specifics. She was 7. He told her that the job situation had been sorted out and that things were going to be a little easier for a while. She accepted this with the practical equanimity of a child who has learned that her father handles what needs handling and tells her what she needs to know. One evening in February, after she had gone to bed, he sat at the kitchen table with the legal document in front of him, not rereading it, just having it there. His wife had been a practical woman who believed in doing the next thing that needed doing and not making too much of it afterward. He thought she would have had something dry and affectionate to say about the whole situation. Something that would have made him feel slightly embarrassed about how seriously he had taken it, and also certain that taking it seriously had been correct. He turned off the kitchen light and went to bed. Outside, the February wind was doing what February wind in Ontario does, which is to say it was working at the edges of everything, at the gaps in the window frames and the space under the front door, persistent and impersonal, not trying to get in so much as simply being what it was. The house held. It had been built to hold, and it was well maintained and it held. In her room, Mira slept with her arm out from under the covers the way she always did, running warm, unbothered by the cold.